your day the grown-up way. Right here. Smooth breakfast. Always fresh and highly informative. The Smooth Breakfast presents the headlines, the stories, in-depth analysis of national current affairs. Freshly pressed. Smooth 98.1.
Time for Freshly Pressed for a Monday morning, the 5th of September 2022. In the next 30 minutes, bringing detailed analysis to the major headlines trending in Nigeria today. Freshly Pressed with Shokwe Martins
and Victor Peppo. We've got our two analysts in for the next half hour. Chetawaze, good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. C, good morning.
Good morning, guys.
Great to have both of you in the studio with us. And you too. We're already streaming live up on youtube.com/smooth 981 FM Lagos. Make sure you go over there, watch what goes on in the studio, and leave your comments to join the conversation. Join the conversation up on WhatsApp as well using this number 0809 440 and up on Twitter we are at smooth981fm. Tag us, we'll see your tweets.
Let's begin with the Punch newspaper this morning. Federal government has uncovered 14 assets, including shopping malls, residential estates, playground, lands, and farmland belonging to a former commander intelligence response team, Kyari, also a deputy commissioner of police. In fact, Kyari was said to have failed to disclose his ownership of the properties in different locations in the FCT and Maiduguri, Borno State. Also, over 200 million naira, over 17.5 euros were also discovered in his various accounts here in Nigeria. Mr. C, a deputy commissioner of police, owns shopping malls, estates in the nation's capital. Interesting.
Well, it's not really interesting per se because it's not uncommon these days to find civil servants, public officers who have assets beyond their legitimate sources of income. Now, beyond this discovery of properties and assets by the police or the NDLEA, the bigger question is what exactly is the plan with the embattled DCP, Abba Kyari? America has asked for him to be extradited to face charges for conspiracy in money laundering and fraud. And for reasons yet to be clearly understood, Nigerian authorities appear not to be willing to send him over to the US. Rather, they instituted the first case, which was a drug case. Now that case does not seem to be proceeding the way it should because just last week another bail application was rejected. Now you're filing a fresh suit, and we must remember that the Attorney General filed an extradition suit which was dismissed by the Federal High Court on the grounds that as a chief law officer he ought to have known that his suit was incompetent. There's been no official response beyond we're going to study the judgment and take the next steps. A government that has repeatedly insisted that it is determined to fight corruption and enthrone law and order should not be running around in fruitless circles. You can discover all the property you want to discover. Can you please send the individual to the US to face charges? If he's truly innocent, he will have his day in court under the American legal system. He will establish his innocence if he can, and then he comes back. What exactly is he still in the country for?
Now, but you know that if he has charges and questions to answer here in Nigeria, then the US have got to wait.
So guess what? We only became aware of the drug trafficking charges or the drug trafficking incident which happened after America formally requested that he be sent over. He was arrested in what appears to be a sting operation after America asked for his extradition. And you want to think that for someone that experienced, the naivety displayed in that video was too amateurish to believe. Now,
It's called impunity.
well, that's one way of looking at it, right? But you will agree with me that even a green police operative might be a bit more circumspect, especially knowing that you're already under the radar of the Americans. What level of impunity are you still operating with? Well, here we are. Assets have been seized. Okay, what's the next step? Where are we headed with this piece of information? His co accused was also discovered to own properties. Fine. The people need to see the wheels of justice grind very quickly, move very quickly. If people are accused of committing crimes and you have the evidence, you shouldn't have a long trial. You shouldn't have a delayed trial. Have it quick, snappy. Let the judgments be delivered, and the people will see that justice was not only delivered, but it was done properly.
Well, there you have it. Let's take a look at this next story. Guardian News has this one. Elite criminals stealing $14.6 billion worth of oil yearly. If we hear from Lele Kyari, he was addressing the 49th session of the State House briefing at the presidential villa in Abuja. Quoted to have said that the country loses 700,000 barrels of crude oil daily to oil theft. And according to him, highly placed Nigerians, including religious and community leaders and government officials, were fully involved in the crude oil theft on a grand scale. Is this a surprise, Cheta? And this has been something that has come about again and again and again, but yet we're in, that seems to be as concrete as we can go when we hear of this news.
The thing is, we're not serious. That's the first problem. So, I want to just allow me to play a bit here. Mhm. Let's consider a hypothetical year when Nigeria produces 2 million barrels of oil per day, which is, given current conditions, the best possible thing that we can produce.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do 2 million every day for 365 days. And the oil price is $100 per barrel for the entire year. The best amount we can generate from that oil production is $73 billion. Hmm? That's the best in a hypothetical very good year. It's one of the first things that shows us how poor the country is, but let's forget that for the moment. Now, based on this thing that Mele Kyari has said, and by the way, he's echoing something that the Gbenga Komolafe, the head of the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, said some weeks ago. Based on what he has said, 14.6 billion is exactly 20% of 73 billion. Exactly. As in, it's a very neat calculation. It's not 19.99% or 21.02%. It is exactly 20%.
Right.
So what they're telling us is that exactly 20% of our hypothetically very good oil production is being taken away. Now, by the time you flip it a little, you realize that Nigeria produces, give or take, on a good day, about 1.3 million barrels a day. So essentially, what they're telling us is that more than 50% of our daily production is vamusen. That's what they are saying in between the lines. And when you now think of things like that, MV Heroic Ijun, I don't know if you heard about, if you remember it, that super tanker that was seized by Equatorial Guinea after spending days in Nigeria.
No, the official account was that they spent less than 10 minutes. You have to balance the narrative.
I'll beat this boy.
The official account.
I'll beat this boy.
No violence
See,
allowed. Continue.
That thing had spent, at least the Equatorial Guinea has said it had spent days. The Nigerian initial reaction was like, that spent days. It was later that they got their stories together. After they probably sat together and they said, okay, what will we say? In stark terms, when you have a vessel capable of storing 3 million barrels of oil, spending time, even if it's 2 minutes in your waters, not as in your country, not just in your territorial waters, in your country, and you did not know, which is what they claim, it tells you about the official complicity in this thing. It is at the highest levels. That is what is happening. So people in official capacities have decided that now this oil, all of us will chop this thing and clean our mouths. The problem with oil is that it's very difficult to clean mouths because oil drips. So the thing is dripping all over the place for everybody to see. It's just that, again, relating it to the Kyari story of earlier, it's the impunity is now so brazen and stark. I'm like, guys, just permit me, let me come and follow you to do.
Seriously.
Yes.
Cheta hasn't gotten to there.
Ah,
Wow.
do this something and then go and buy one political position and then everybody will be happy.
Let's move on quickly before Cheta goes and makes himself a colonel.
All right, still staying with you, Cheta, for this one in from the Vanguard, the Punch newspaper. Insecurity, vandalism, forced Eastern Rail suspension, says Minister of Transport, Muazu Sambo. Now, he said the Port Harcourt Maiduguri Eastern Line was suspended due to insecurity and vandalism of rail properties along the corridor.
See, I'm not going to talk about the act of suspension in itself. And what I think I would want to focus on is, and permit me to tell a very brief story. In the 492 years between the fall of Constantinople and the start of the Second World War in Europe, there were 273 armed conflicts between national groups in Western Europe. That's an average of almost one war every 2 years. In the 70, when did World War II end? 1945. So in the 78 years or thereabouts, 77 years since the war, the end of the war, there has been a grand total of 0 armed conflicts between national groups in Western Europe. The question is why? And the answer is very simple. When the Second World War ended, the Americans who have been the masters of Western Europe since then, instituted something called the Marshall Plan, which integrated the economy of Western Europe. So suddenly, the French, who used to say the only good German is a dead German, it's even included in the words of their national anthem. So we began to trade with Germany a lot. So you find that the president of France and chancellor of Germany are very good buddies. Trade. It's not an accident that prior to the rise of insecurity in the Northwest and in other parts of the country, all of Nigeria's security problems were in the area that you call the Second National Economic Corridor, 2NEC, which many people haven't heard about. As of the end of the 1950s and the early 1960s, the government had had 2 corridors. The first corridor, the First National Economic Corridor, runs from Lagos to Jibia in Katsina State through Kano. It's what they call Lakaji Corridor now. I'm sure many people have heard of Lakaji. The Second National Economic Corridor runs from Port Harcourt to Maiduguri through Aba, Makurdi, and Bauchi. Essentially, they follow the old colonial rail lines roughly. A lot of Nigeria's government presence and effort has been towards the Lakaji corridor. You see tenders everywhere. You see but the Second National Economic Corridor, abandoned, left. So the economy around the Second National Economic Corridor essentially crumbled. So it was not an accident that all of the security brouhaha we're having in the country, where Niger Delta militancy, Boko Haram, herdsmen crisis, they were on that corridor. It's only in the last few years that areas around the northern end of the Lakaji corridor have joined in the party. Essentially, you have to fix trade, and this rail line, a single train filled with goods, can carry a lot more than 50 trailers. Fix this rail line, no matter the cost, no matter what. What would it cost for you to set up a serious monitoring system and have proper security personnel monitoring the work and following that rail line? Instead of making excuses, and then later when the result of our excuses comes to fruition, all of us will be wondering what happened.
All right, we'll be taking your messages in just a bit on 0809 440 That's the WhatsApp platform. We already see your messages coming in on youtube.com/smooth 981 FM Lagos. Yinka Bolu says 700,000 barrels of crude oil being lost to theft will never make sense to me. For example, Bonga FPSO is 300,000 production capacity. Akpo is around 225,000 production capacity. And he goes on to mention a few, which means we're effectively claiming that there's a facility almost operating in the dark and under the radar dedicated to stealing crude. It's either we aren't getting our production figures right, or the IOCs and federal government are in on this. The vessel arrested by Equatorial Guinea was approaching an SPM for hookup, I presume, which is all owned by an IOC, and you can't approach an SPM without clearance. In fact, you can't even enter a 500-meter radius of some offshore assets. Hold on one second, Mrs. C, please. Without security clearance. So, what exactly are we saying here?
Let me quickly respond to that. The Nigerian Navy last week issued a statement complaining about several incidents where vessels will pull up to these platforms without the proper clearance, and as they're about to arrest the vessels, some chaps from NNPC will then send the documentation. So it is possible, and it has happened, that vessels will pull up to these platforms without the documentation.
Interesting.
Like I said earlier, there's official complicity.
On YouTube, Olaolu Olagunju says this Kyari story puts a hole in the anti-corruption spiel that we're getting from this government. The depth and breadth of the crude oil theft is not unknown. The wool cannot be placed over our eyes for long. We must do better.
Kenneth on WhatsApp is saying the motion filed by the AG for extradition is so funny. Did he intentionally file the motion knowing it will be thrown out, or it's a level of ignorance because I don't understand? And Sam goes on, he says, with the government of the day, blackmail the residence doctor, blackmail, I believe, the residence doctor now. The same thing that happened to our educational sector is about to happen to the health system. I hope this government knows what they're doing. You know, we're not serious set of people. The president is the minister of petroleum, and we still can't account for the number of oil we consume in our country. God help us. Sam sent that from Ota.
All right, we'll take this one in from Tayo from Aja, who says Kyari must be the hardest working police officer, maintaining his business interests and human rights at the same time. People are stealing oil, but government forgot to mention names. We have unlocked a new lexicon: unknown oil thieves. The amount of unknown people that we have in this country is really quite spectacular. Let's move on now.
Cisco Delgado, Mr. Siancheta, please preach to Nigerians. The topic I don't know. The corruption and impunity in NNPC is allowed to fester because the so-called petroleum minister is not up and doing. You're expanding billions on you're expending, I believe, billions on NNPC without producing a pint of petroleum products. What a waste of resources. Idima Puza from Surulere.
All right, and we have got more. We'll take this one from Jibril on the run, who says there is no way vessels will come in and out without naval officers knowing because they always run after vessels asking for signal. Um, Tony from Ikeja says the suspension of work on the Eastern Rail Line came a little too late. Thanks to Abia boys, you can't give the eastern parts of Nigeria narrow gauge while you're constructing standard gauge in the rest of the regions. The right government will definitely address this. Oh, and many more
slightly
messages.
different arguments to him, because I remember when the announcement was made that they would simply rehabilitate. I think that was 2 years ago, and a lot of people from my part of the country were up in arms and made this very argument. Let's get the line first. Let's get the train working first. The difference between standard gauge and narrow gauge is speed. It's not in what it can carry. Get the one that you can get first. What is happening now is even that narrow one we are not getting it.
All right. Okay, let's take a look at our next article, which comes in from The Nation. All right, so NNPC petrol to sell for 462 naira per liter without subsidy. This coming in from The Nation, like I said. Apparently, according to NNPC, this would be a combination of the cost elements, let's see, an average subsidy of 297 naira per liter and an annual estimate of 6.5 trillion naira on the assumption of 60 million liters of daily premium motor spirit supply. Oh, wow. Cheta, you know what? There's a whole lot to this story. Slightly confusing, but at the heart of it was this statement, which is without subsidy, be bracing yourselves for 462 naira per liter. What do you want to say about this?
Let's pitch. No,
At this
let,
point, you already know what I said about this earlier today.
see the criminal part of this whole subsidy racket is the fact that they are telling us that they are supplying 68 million liters of petrol.
98.
When 68, 98, whatever. When it is, as in, are you telling me that Nigeria suddenly, just 10 years ago, it was 30 million liters? So are you telling me that in 10 years our productivity has multiplied by more than, or in some cases, a factor of 3? It has not. In short, arguably, our productivity has actually reduced. Now, when you zoom out and look at West Africa, you will find that if you convert the price of a liter of petrol at current exchange rates to the dollar, you'll find that Nigeria is selling petrol at about 40 cents or thereabouts per dollar. Sorry, per liter. Benin is selling at 97. Sorry, at 79. Niger is selling at 97. Cameroon is selling at $1.16. In these three countries which border Nigeria, if you go to a petrol station, you will hardly see people buying fuel in a normal petrol station. But you will see people buying fuel from hawkers along the road, black markets.
Where do they get
So
their...
the question I should ask is, why is black markets cheaper than the official petrol? Because they get them from Big Brother Nigeria. Essentially, you, and you are subsidizing petrol in our neighbors. And people in Nigeria are making so much from this scam, they want it to continue ad infinitum. Remove that thing.
At the end of the day, Cheta, just a quick question. So, looking at this headline and looking at the information that's being given, oh yeah, it feels like a threat.
It is a threat. They're trying to play the strings, the emotional strings of Nigerians, so that all of us will come out into the streets like we foolishly did in Ojota 10 years ago and say, no, leave it. Is it helping us? No. At least now we have 10 years of evidence to show that it is not helping us and it's actually making our lives worse. You know the funny thing? At least some of us go to other countries. I have been closely monitoring petrol prices in the UK. They go up and they go down depending on the season, like any other commodity. So it is not wrong for our petrol prices to go up and go down depending on the price of oil.
One thing I would ask though is, you mentioned 10 years ago, right? 2012. Comparing 2022 and the people's feelings and thoughts on this to 2012, have you seen any change?
We were very foolish in 2012. I hope we're not that foolish now.
All right, let's take it to the Punch newspaper. Mr. C, I'm coming to you for this one. Doctors' ultimatum ends today. Holds neck meeting on Saturday. Of course, that meeting will be held on Saturday in Jos Plateau State to deliberate the ultimatum.
Okay, so very quickly, another strike is loading. Now, Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors had initially gone on strike. No, it initially issued a 2-week ultimatum on the 30th of July for the federal government to meet its demands. Of course, the demands were not met, and the ultimatum was extended in August, and that ultimatum has ended. Now, what are some of these demands? Payment of the medical residency training fund, the new hazard allowances, and other issues that were agreed on. Now, the federal government apparently has not met in full or in part these demands. And it continually begs, so the resident doctors have a meeting on Saturday in Jos to decide the next course of action. Now, we must understand that when we go to the public hospitals, the first line of doctors we meet are the resident doctors. The consultants are the big boys. They're rarely there. And they come in at times that are convenient for them. It is the resident doctors that attend to you on a daily basis. Now, if these guys go on strike, what does that portend for the average Nigerian today? Not every Nigerian can afford to go to a private hospital. So for those who are stuck, for those who have only the general hospitals to cater for them, the primary health centers to cater for them, how do they do this? And this is a government that appears to be extremely unserious. You have so many problems all over the place. You're not solving any. You're carrying on as if it's all good. And that you will then hear the president is jetting off yet to another country to do what? Your country is on fire. You shouldn't be seen outside the country. You should be here seen trying to fix the problems. Education is a hot mess. The health sector is another hot mess. Security is, let's not even talk about security today. The economy is a joke. And these are resident doctors, right? They're putting their lives on the line. They're doing the work, yet you will not pay them. Yet the political class, whose contributions we can't readily see, examine, or measure, never have their salaries or allowances delayed, let alone unpaid. When are Nigerians going to decide enough is enough of all this nonsense and put
The truth of the matter, Mr. C, is that all of these things are a reflection of us. That's the fact. Again, I will draw us back to the reaction to that threatened NEPA strike. There's a political cost to if NEPA had gone on strike this year, whatever. So because there's a political cost to that, everybody ran around to avert it. It was more than they gave a further ultimatum. They gave an extended ultimatum of 2 weeks, if you remember. That was 3 weeks ago. So the fact that after 3 weeks of a 2 week ultimatum, they haven't talked about going on strike means that people have been settled. That's what it means. Again, they reacted very quickly to that one because there's a political cost. In the case of ASU or doctors, there isn't a political cost. It shows you what the Nigerian values, because that's the Nigerian political class is responding to the incentives of what the Nigerian people value. Kokuno.
Let's take a look at this next article in from the Premium Times. Very interesting one. Nigeria to pay $496 million to settle Indian firm's claim over Ajaokuta Steel. This is our Global Steel Holdings Limited. Mr. C, can you take us through this?
Okay, so very quickly, we have to go back down memory lane to understand what has transpired today. Now, sometime in 2005, 2006, an Indian company was given the Ajaokuta steel mill and the steel mill at Otakpe. Now, they were required to pay the sum of 26 million US dollars as a first tranche for their shares. 55 days before that money would have become due to the Nigerian government. Some wonderful individuals within the Nigerian political space at that time terminated that agreement. Consequently, they went to arbitration, and after many years of settlements, discussions, we're now paying 496 million US dollars out of a 5.2 billion US dollar claim. So it begs the question, should we even have gotten to this point in the first place? Certainly not. But again, the culture of impunity continues to pervade the land. People do what they like, there are no sanctions. Well, kudos to this administration. They got PwC to look at the claims, to look at the interests of Nigeria, and to suggest a way forward. And the way forward is to settle this claim with 496 million US dollars. Now, the bigger question is this. We're in the midst of a dollar scarcity. Where are they going to find this money?
They will find it, don't worry. Again, political costs. There's a political cost to not doing something, so they will find the money. Look at the way they treated the airlines. They found the money. We are still in dollar scarcity, but they found the money.
Listen, we'll just take a few messages to end this show. This one in from Victor Shell says proceeds from all production aren't computed by simply multiplying price and volume. The federal government only takes about 40% of the price of oil via joint ventures with oil producing companies, with other federal government revenue coming in
Can I
via
answer very
tax and
sharply?
royalty.
We love
It's
lecturers such as
time.
this. Basically it was an illustration to see just how much is being stolen. We're not talking of what accrues to the federal government.
Well, please, okay, let's take another message. Yumi is saying, do you think all production facilities are connected? This theft is by a few big IOCs. I will keep it going. Chukwemeka is saying, how will they fix our railways when the whole tanks are owned by the big boys in town?
We'll take this one in from Daniel Okoye, who says these resident doctors should have pity. Though their work is difficult, but we don't have money to pay them. We're still dealing with ASU. Please let them reconsider their plan. I'm sure they're listening.
Emeka from Amuwo, for an entire year since the last negotiation, the resident doctors were abandoned. Hazard allowance is still 5,000 naira. When the doctors now go on strike, Nigerians will start flashing hypocritic oaths to their talking about their
The
Hippocratic
hypocritical.
oaths to their faces. We are the cause of our own problems.
Okay, well, we'll have to end the show now, but the conversation need not end. All you need to do is find our analysts and find us up on Twitter. We are at Smooth981FM. Through us, and just by searching as well, you can find at Monsieur C. He's across the social media platforms, as is Chickster. So at Monsieur C has three E's behind the C, and at Chickster is CHXTA.
Well, that's about it. At 8:15 will be time for sports inside the locker room.
And
Headlines,
she smiled.
the stories, the news.
She's been waiting.
She's waiting.
I said she's been waiting.
Freshly
Thank you so much for joining us today on Freshly Pressed. And we are done.